So why does Buddhism not encourage sensual pleasure? The next one, music and dance give happiness to man. What is the Buddhist attitude towards music? So we can discuss under the same subject. Sensual pleasure and music and dance. Did I discuss this one, sensual pleasure? No. Of course, earlier we have discussed a lot, but we can combine together. I think you can remember, I have told you, as human beings, we must have some sort of entertainment to satisfy our what? Our human emotion. Please remember this. This is one of the special characteristics amongst the human beings, because this emotion, very, very lesser degree we can find amongst the others. So we like to joke, laugh, and talk all sort of nonsensical things, but we enjoy it. That is the way how we entertain our emotions. So, harmless way, we have to entertain our emotions. Otherwise, human mind can become very, very stubborn, very skeptical, and very also can become very aggressive and violent. So when we entertain that human emotion, we can calm our intrinsic habits. By nature, some are very hot-tempered, some are very moody and temperamental, do not know how to joke, and smiling or laughing and cheerfulness also see in their faces. Moody. There are many. That means something is wrong somewhere in their mind. No outlet to express their emotion. Very good example. Here in this country, I think you have seen many occasions in the newspaper, many of those young girls in certain schools and colleges and institutes suddenly get some sort of sickness, a mental problem, hysteria. And they believe that it is due to the influence of ghosts or devils or spirits or whatever it may be. But if we analyze psychologically, that is the effect of arresting their human emotion from their childhood. So much of restriction according to their religious laws and according to their culture and traditions and way of life. They keep under control by force. But those emotional feelings that we experience become very irritable in our mind. And later, when little bit of incident take place, that incident creates the mental disturbances. Then one person got it, then all the others follow. This is the nature of this. Hundreds of them in certain cases. So, some people believe that Buddhism never encourage or give freedom for people to entertain their human emotion or to experience a sensual pleasure. So that interpretation is wrong. So when you study the life of the Buddha, the way how he spent for 45 years, if you study very carefully his attitude, his way of talking, and his presentation, there are so many jokes, very humorous way of explaining certain thing for others to take that idea very seriously. I think you can understand. I have explained a special characteristics that the Buddha maintained, only the Buddha. Even Arahantas, Pacceka Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, or any other religious teachers never maintain, never possess this special characteristics. The important thing is this. Asaya Anusaya Jnana. Jnana means knowledge and understanding. Asaya Anusaya Jnana. What is it? To preach others by knowing their mentality, by knowing their understanding capacity, by knowing the hindrances that interrupt their understanding, by knowing what sort of misconceptions they maintain in their mind. Not only that, by studying the previous experience, because each of us maintain some of our previous habits. They are known as intrinsic habits by nature. It is our previous experience. So the Buddha is the only one who can understand. This person was like this, what he has done during his previous birth, what he has studied. Then the ingredients of those mental habits that he maintained during his previous birth are still maintained in our mind. So by realizing all these things, directly the Buddha give only one or two ideas. That means he directly gives injection up the point where the sickness is. That is how many people attain first stage of sainthood, second stage, third stage, arahanthood, after listening to one or two words. Because of their previous experience, the Buddha has directly pointed out what this person really needs. So when we preach, actually we preach blindly. Many speakers, many preachers, many monks, they go on talking, mentioning what is written in the books. But they never consider whether people can understand, whether they can appreciate their way of talking. That is what people say, oh, very boring. I remember one day when I was attending an inter-religious forum in Batu Caves. Another religious teacher he was reading his paper. He was going on reading and reading and reading. People could not tolerate. One man who could not tolerate anymore, he got up and shouted, "Very boring." That poor man he's a religious teacher, had to sit down. That means they do not know what to talk. They never consider who these people are, what they really want to know. So we can measure only this much. But in the case of the Buddha, he studied everything, even our previous birth also. I think you can remember that a story. A monk who had been meditating for a long time could not gain anything, because his meditation master has given him a wrong object for his meditation. So he got fed up, want to give up. The Buddha came to know this, summoned him and asked, "What is wrong with you?" "Yes, I have been working so hard. I did not gain anything." "Why?" Then the Buddha knew that he was given a wrong object for his meditation. All right. Then he said, "Okay, we take this golden lotus flower, concentrate. At once, very easily, you could concentrate without any mental hindrances." The Buddha was watching his mind, how changes take place in his mind. So, by knowing this, suddenly he changed the color, golden color of the petals into dark color. Then he started to think very deeply. Just now these flowers are so shining, but now turn into dark color. Oh, how changes can take place. This is real concentration. Again the Buddha knew how the mind is changing and changing. Then he created a vibration to drop all the petals from that lotus flower. Everything's dropped. He is holding only a stick. Then started to think, oh, impermanency, changes in everything. So the life, anything that which exists is exactly like this. The Buddha has paved the way for him to get into that particular track in his mind. Then he realized the truth and the Dhamma and attained sainthood. Later, he explained to the others, do you know why this person could not gain anything? Earlier, because he was given a wrong object. This man was a goldsmith. He had been dealing with gold, not only within this life, even his previous birth also. He is used to gold, and very easily he can concentrate on that particular subject. That is why he was succeeded. Now you can understand why the Buddha is important, only for this purpose. We always think how nice if we can meet a Buddha, if we can see a Buddha. But our idea is to go and worship and get his blessing, that's all. We know only that much. That is not very important. The Buddha is important for us for this purpose. There is nobody to open our mind and to tell us where are the mistakes in our mind. What are the weaknesses in our mind. The mind is such, I do not know my own weaknesses because of my egoism. I always try to hide it. It is a weakness. So the Buddha directly point out. One day, 5 people came to ask questions. It's a very big debate, dialogue, discussion, argument for 45 years. The Buddha's teaching is very rich, philosophically, psychologically, doctrinally, morally, because of this. Because he had the chance to discuss all these things. Many other religious teachers never had this chance. They have conveyed something saying given by the God, that's all. So when those people came and challenged, then the Buddha had to explain. So 5 people came to challenge. One of them was well educated, but he was a real fool. He asked the first question. The Buddha knew that this man cannot understand the answer. Then what he did? He said, you better wait. Then allow the other man to ask the question. Then he knew that this man can understand. He answered. Then again this man asked. The Buddha said, I asked you to wait. Why so impatient? Then the third person asked the question, he gave the answer. Again this man asked, you better wait. This is the way how he tamed and trained that man. So he completed, he answered in such a way for that man also to understand gradually. Because at once he cannot catch anything, cannot grasp anything. In the end, the Buddha said, okay, now this is your turn. What is your question? Now I have nothing to ask. Realizations appear. If the Buddha answered directly to him at the beginning, he cannot understand anything. See the technique. He had thousands of techniques by knowing the mentality. So, now I don't know what I am talking. The subject is something else. I have gone somewhere else. Yes. Human emotion. That's why we got into this. The Dhamma taught by the Buddha divided into 2. Sutra and Abhidhamma. Vinaya is only disciplinary code. Many of those disciplines are changeable from time to time, country to country, according to their way of life. Is it natural? But the Dhamma never change. No one can change. Dhamma is natural. So this Dhamma divided into 2. What are those 2? Sutra and Abhidhamma. Now, all the while when we talk about the Dhamma, we talk all the sutras, discourse and gathas taught by the Buddha for us to understand simple things. But the highest doctrine or philosophy or psychology you cannot find there. Then he has explained the definitions of human mind, analysis, the definitions of existing elements and various kind of energies. So when you analyze, this is known as Abhidhamma, highest doctrine. If not, we can introduce this as Buddhist psychology. So there we can understand how human mind functions and why evil forces appear, why good thoughts appear in our mind, and what is the method for us to curtail or to suppress or to control evil forces which appear in our mind. What are the methods for us to practice, to cultivate more and more good thoughts in our mind? Then he has given the reason, causes, why these things appear. This is the deeper aspect of the Buddha's teaching. So he has divided this into two according to the understanding capacity of the audience. Even monks also, many of those monks could not understand the highest aspect of the Dhamma. Very few, especially Sariputta, the chief disciple. That is why he was appointed as the chief disciple for wisdom, famous for wisdom. And another one, Moggallana, another chief disciple, is famous for miraculous, supernormal, supernatural things. He is very useful to the masses because people like to see miraculous things. When Sariputta goes out and gives sermon, but he must come and report to the Buddha because he wants to find out whether there is any mistake. So he repeats everything to the Buddha. Then the Buddha says, excellent. No mistake at all. He confirmed. So those teachings also we accept as the Buddha's teaching. Divided into Buddha Bhasita, Sravaka Bhasita, Isi Bhasita, Deva Bhasita, into four groups. In Tripitaka, you can find four groups of Dhamma. Dhamma directly taught by the Buddha. Buddha Bhasita, taught by the Buddha. Dhamma taught by the disciple, like Sariputta, Ananda, Kasyapa, Moggallana, and so many other disciples, but confirmed by the Buddha, but not their own doctrine, same doctrine. Then Isi Bhasita, there were very learned religious teachers in India at that time, not only Buddhist. And we should not think that they are wrong. They are also very intelligent. They too had wisdom, but not completed. So whatever truth that they have revealed, the Buddha accepted, they are saying as truth. This is called Isi Bhasita. Deva Bhasita. When you read Samyutta Nikaya, one particular chapter is called Devata Samyutta, Devas. When they had some ideas or some doubts, they come and discuss with the Buddha. And certain things that they expressed, the Buddha said, yes, it is true. And certain things, he said, no, it is not true. For instance, one day, one of the Devas came and taught the Buddha. I think amongst all those things that we love in this world, to us, the most precious, most valuable thing is our own son, our own child. This is the idea given by the Deva. Then the Buddha said, you are wrong. Deva says, Natti putta samang prema, love. My son, I have no such prema or such love to another person as I love towards my son. Then the Buddha says, you are wrong. Then he says, Natti atta samang prema. Not your son, not your wife, not your husband, not your property, but you love more for yourself. That is higher. Whatever you say, your love toward your son is emotional, changeable. That is emotional love. And also there is a time limit for that. For certain time you love, certain time you hate. See how changes take place. It is not permanent. But love that you maintain towards yourself is unchangeable. You are willing to sacrifice even your sons and wife and husband to save yourself, to protect yourself. It is natural. There are so many discussions, dialogue between Devas and Buddhas. And certain things that they have revealed, if it is true, the Buddha accepted. So all these things have been collected after his passing away. So when you read all those different sutras, Nikayas, Pitakas, then you can see. So because Dharma remains. The Buddha cannot create any Dharma in this world. A God cannot create Dharma. It is natural. It exists. Only problem with us is we cannot understand due to our ignorance. Then the Buddha advised us, taught us how to get rid of that ignorance to realize the Dhamma. Now when we explain the nature of Nirvana as taught by the Buddha, thousands of people create some ideas in their mind according to their own way of thinking, according to their own wishes, ambitions or taste. But the truth is not there. This is our problem. Always we accept things according to our needs. So whatever we say can satisfy your needs, then you say yes, very good, very nice. Otherwise, it will never appeal to your mind. And you never pay attention. Example, when you go to a medicine shop, you can see thousands of medicines there, different brands. So many medicines for one particular sickness. But you are used to one particular medicine. Then you say, I am interested only this particular medicine. I am not interested in others. This is the way how you choose according to your needs. The Dhamma and religion also you choose in this way. This is very important. This is very valuable. That is what I need. But can you say all the other medicines are useless? To many others, there are so many other medicines. Next day when you go there, you want another kind of medicine, not the same thing, for another sickness. So the Dhamma also, exactly like this. After listening to this talk, many of you may say, yes, today's talk is very good. Why only today? Because certain ideas, presentations or clarifications appeal to your mind at that moment according to your way of thinking. That is why you say it is good. But in the Dhamma, there is nothing for you to discard. When the time comes, then you want another one, another item. When you are worried, you need different kind of Dharma. When you are worried, you need different kind of Dharma. When you have fear, you have another kind of Dharma. When you want to gain something, you want another kind of Dharma. When you need protection from evil forces and this and that, you need another kind of Dharma. When you want to understand many things, what is happening in this world, another kind of Dharma. So all these things are important. This is the nature of human mind. Now let us come back to our subject. Sensual pleasure, we have how many senses? Have you got? 6. What are those 6? What are those 6? These 5, of course, everybody knows. All the 5 senses. Where is the other one? Mind. Why do you want to take mind also as one of the senses? In fact, these senses cannot enjoy. Senses never enjoy. These are the channels used by the mind. Mind enjoy and mind suffer. Body cannot enjoy, body cannot suffer if there is no mind. But we say 5 senses. When we hear nice music, you say, pleasing to my ear. Actually, ear cannot enjoy that sound. Ear consciousness, the consciousness that is functioning through this channel, enjoy the music. When you eat very tasty food, this is a very tasty, then who enjoy this taste? You think your mouth. Mouth cannot enjoy this taste. The mind related to that particular sense enjoy the taste. All the 5 senses are like this. Then assume a man who is completely blind, deaf, and no taste also in the mouth. And all the 5 senses are, and no sensation, no feeling, numbness. All the 5 senses are out of order. Even then, this man can enjoy his life. How does he enjoy? He creates mental objects. Mind creates objects. This is another delicate problem. How does he create objects if he has not seen anything within this life? Never heard anything within this lifetime. How does he create objects? Can you answer? That's right. Mental habits we maintain in our mind. Because of that, very easily we can create mental objects without any support from the five senses. And our temperaments, moods, attitudes, habits are based on this mental object. Many things that we have not learned from anybody or intelligence or talents, natural. The ingredients are there already in the mind. That is why the mind itself can create any kind of objects according to previous experience. We are going on collecting all these habits and experiences. What is pleasure? We provide certain things to satisfy, to please our mind through these senses. That is called pleasure. Then, what is the Buddhist attitude? Can you say the Buddha or Buddhism advise us not to experience any kind of sensual pleasure? No. The Buddha's advice is, you can experience, you can indulge all the five senses without adopting any wrong method, without violating peace and justice and natural law. There's a natural law. You can experience any kind of worldly or sensual pleasure without bluffing and swindling and cheating and disturbing others. This is the Buddhist attitude. There are many who enjoy their life without violating, without disturbing others. The Buddhas and Arahantas, Pacceka Buddhas have no craving, no anxieties, no ambitions whatsoever. But do you think when they eat food, they do not enjoy food? Do you think? But your way of enjoying and their way of enjoying is entirely different. You crave for your food, but they never crave for their food. The taste, sour, salt and sweetness, they also experience just like us. They say, yes, nice taste, but they never crave. Taste is nice. While experiencing this, they concentrate on that taste. How do they concentrate? We take this food just to sustain or to maintain our physical body, our senses, our mind, to carry on our noble way of life, but not to enjoy our life, not to develop our body, not to beautify our body. See the difference now. Then, music and dance, cultural aspects. Hinduism appreciates music and dance. It is part of their religion. Religious dance, religious music, religious performances they have. The Buddhism has taken a different attitude towards music and dance. Some people believe that Buddhism goes against music and dance and entertainment. Also wrong. There is no such religious principle. But those who renounce their worldly life for a short while, or the time being, or few days, few months, or forever, they keep away from those entertainments because such entertainments are not important to them. Because their idea is not to entertain their emotion, but to cultivate their spiritual way of life. Through emotional satisfaction, they cannot develop this. This is the gap. Many people cannot understand this. But all the others who lead household life, before their renunciation, they must have some sort of music, cultural dance, and performances. To them, that aspect, cultural aspect, is very important. So later, they have incorporated religion and culture together. Then what happened? Culture promoted religion. Religion supported and developed culture. How? When we take Indian culture, Chinese culture, or Middle East, in the Western culture, I do not know actually how far their culture is related to their religion. There must be something, we cannot say no. But directly, Indian and Chinese, these two cultures are related and interrelated, embrace each other. So whenever they perform some sort of cultural aspect, there is at least little bit of their religion. Whenever they practice their religion, 75% their cultural aspect. That is how we organize celebration. Now let us take Moon Cake Festival. It is a cultural aspect. Through this Moon Cake Festival, you imbue religion also there. You talk about religion and you observe certain principles and in a religious atmosphere. So, join together. If you try to separate these two, religion also in difficulty and culture also in difficulty. Religion becomes very, very dry philosophy or psychology without culture. And the culture can become a cultural desert without religion, no taste. So in many Buddhist countries, they have taken the life of the Buddha in various aspects
to perform. And previous birth stories of the Buddha, very interesting, beautiful stories. Are they? Singing, dancing, performance, entertainments, you can see there. So these two things are interrelated. Until we attain our age to experience maturity through our understanding, this is the most important aspect in our life. Young people, children, and many others who have not studied the deep aspect of philosophy or religion appreciate only this much. But through these practices, slowly we can introduce religion. Those who are not interested in religion also get used to it through these practices. That is how young people slowly get into religious way of life. First they come to entertain, enjoy, sing song and dance and to decorate, beautify. They are interested only in those practices. But through these practices, then what do they decorate? There are religious pictures. What do they draw? Religious pictures. And what do they sing? Religious hymns. See how these two things are incorporated. So we cannot say Buddhism goes against music and dance. And why there is some sort of hostility? Yes, there is in Buddhism. That is the reason why Buddhism did not encourage, not as a cultural aspect. They regarded this as immoral. Even today when you go to a nightclub, you can see the fun. No religious aspect, no cultural aspect, mostly very vulgar, although I have never been. I heard very immoral. Cannot imagine certain things what people come and discuss. Then religion advice. Keep away. If you waste your time only for these things, you have no chance to come back. You lose your valuable human life. Within this lifetime also you get into trouble physically and mentally and financially. Again after your death also you get into trouble. Otherwise, if you know how to organize religion and culture together to perform very decent way without adopting any immoral method, with due respect to our Western culture, I had to say, the modern Western culture, mostly which come from America and some other countries, completely polluted our culture here. So our young boys and girls are interested in all those things like break dance and rock dance and dog dance. No culture at all. Not suitable for human beings. The way how they behave. These are the things that religion never encouraged. But beside these things, you cannot say Buddhism goes against this. I told you one day how the Buddha appreciated a well-known singer, Panchasikha. He came with his musical instrument, So in front of the Buddha, he played his guitar and started singing. The Buddha was listening attentively. He never said, "Oh, you cannot perform all these things here in the temple. This is a holy place. You cannot do this kind of thing." No. So after that he said, "Wonderful, remarkable. Your voice and rhythm and the music, all these things harmonize. You have done this very beautifully." He appreciated. So Buddhism cannot go against anything if it is good. If a flower is beautiful, Buddhism can say it is very ugly. But when you think deeply, many others think only beauty. Yes, we also enjoy beauty, but we penetrate further. Then we concentrate. Yes, now it is very beautiful. After a few days' time, we can see the beauty also disappear, the fragrance also disappear, and the petals also drop and dry. This is the nature of beauty. But others cannot go and understand up to that extent. That is what Buddhism contributes. Not to become slaves to that beauty. Appreciate. Yes, it is nice, beautiful. But go further. Then you never get into trouble. Very easily you can get into trouble if you follow beauty without analyzing, without considering. So those who have renounced their worldly life, having seen all these things, gone through all these canals, are realized. Actually there is nothing. It is true. Like it is an illusion, it is a maya, it is a dream. Now when you think, there are few elders here, when you think how you enjoyed your life when you were very young, you feel that it is exactly a dream. But you might have learned very good lessons through your trials and errors or the mistakes done by you. That is the only lessons you have learned. How much you have wasted. The time that you have wasted. And a strength and energy you have wasted. Many people regret later. What a pity, those days we never knew all these things. Because very raw, cannot understand. So when you learn the Dhamma, then you know how to appreciate, how to enjoy. Very reasonable way, respectable way, without disturbing ourselves and without disturbing others. So Buddhism cannot say it is wrong. Today I got a book from India, I don't know what they have written, Romantic Life of the Buddha. I don't know what they have written. Of course, although they use the word Buddha, it is not after his enlightenment, no romantic life after his enlightenment. As Prince Siddhartha, I told you several times, before he renounced the worldly life, he was a playboy. There are so many stories, because he led a worldly life. But all the while he was thinking very deeply while enjoying through every senses watching and thinking, concentrating, until the maturity take place in his mind, then decided to renounce. So, in your case, so I am giving this advice to our young people, not to be crazy for pleasure, not to become slaves to your senses. Still got time. First, you must try to learn, establish, settle down. Then, reasonably way, you can experience this so-called worldly life. This is the method introduced in our ancient culture, ancient way of life. When we are young, our duty is to study. Don't get involved with so much of romantic affairs, politics. Disturb the mind, cannot concentrate, cannot study. When you attain teenage, after completion your studies, that is the time for you to experience, because there is some sort of solid ideas in your mind. Your mind is not shallow now. You know what to do when you are at crossroads through your education. Then you know how to take precaution, prevention, how to avoid, how to do certain things. Go on experiencing, reasonable way. You never commit any sin when you experience your worldly pleasure in respectable way, reasonable way. Cannot. If you have no guilty feeling in your mind, you cannot commit any sin. You never violate anything, because these things are natural things. But if you follow these natural instinct, because animals also follow this, then there is a difference. So we should not enjoy our life just like animals. There must be some sort of understanding. There is a limit for everything. There is a period for everything. So when you attain middle age, then you have to slow down. Many of those enjoyments you have to reduce. Physically, mentally, slowly going down and down and down. Then you also must slow down. Then you won't get into trouble. You never regret later. Now you are following the time. You adjust yourself to move according to the time. Because every minute we are marching towards our graveyard. That is what we are doing. We cannot withdraw. We cannot go backward. Must march. By knowing this, adjust our life. Right? We enjoy our worldly life. Now we know what it is. And those who want to enjoy their worldly life also must have some principles to enjoy without violating and without disturbing, without bluffing. Then there will be a time for you to reduce. Then go on reducing and reducing. One day, when realization appears in your mind, then you can renounce the rest. Then have peace of mind. After that, craving, anxieties, ambitions, jealousies, hatred, ill will, grudge, enmity never appear. No reason. Because all these dirty things appear in our mind because of our crazy attitude toward one of these pleasures. And this world is called Kama Loka, sensual world where living beings experience more sensual pleasure, little bit of a spiritual development. Among all the other living beings, those who exist in this mundane world or sensual world, human beings have more chances, facilities to develop this, a spiritual aspect. But all the others have become slaves only to their senses. Animals, no chance. And ghost and spirit and devils also no chance. Devas, many of those devas also have no chance, but they really enjoy their life, better than human beings. But they do not know their fate, their destiny after their death. Uncertainty. Many of those Brahmas who experience more peace, more calmness in their life, who experience longer period, even then there will be an end to it. But they cannot understand this. So human beings can understand this. And this is the development in our mind. We know we can enjoy for a certain period. We know we can adjust our way of life, not to worry, not to regret in future. We know how to adjust our way of life to die one day peacefully, without worrying and without crying. And we know how to die with confidence